Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at the BeGedKePT, the BeGedKePat, however you want to pronounce it, letters in Hebrew and Aramaic. These are 6 letters that have at least 2 sounds, or at least historically they were taught to have 2 sounds. That's not always the case in the modern era, but when we learn these languages, we learn them as having 2 sounds. So real quick, I've included both the square alphabet, mraba'o or kitav ashuri on the left, and on the right, I have the Syriac cursive. If you don't know how to read either alphabet, just kind of look with your eyes a little bit, and you can start to see how these letters are very similar. And in fact, if you just think of Syriac as a cursive version of the square script, then it's really easy to learn. But that's a story for another video. So beginning from right to left, and you can look at either alphabet that you know or are familiar with, we have Beth, Gomal or Gimel, Dolet or Dalet, Kaf, Pei, and Tau or Tav. So each of these produces 2 sounds, BGDKPT, and that's where we get the acronym BeGedKePaT from, or BeGedKePT. However you want to say it. You can say it any way in your world. Now, to distinguish these from one another, there's a couple of different conventions. In Syriac, you either leave the letter blank or you place a superscripted dot just slightly above and to the right of the letter. These are all hard sounds that basically give us the same sound as the letter we equate them to in English. So B is B, G is G, D is D, K is K, P is P, T is T. Now in Hebrew, you'll have a dagesh inside. That's just a dot inside, and that indicates that the letter is hard. Now to make the letter soft, you place a dot below the letter, and the dot goes just slightly to the right, sort of the same as what we saw with the hard letter. The hard letters are called kushoyo, and the soft letters are called rukocho, at least in the Syriac tradition. Now, when we transliterate these, we underline them. So that's why you see an underline under the B. And in Hebrew, you don't have any dotting. So when there's no dot, it's soft. That's kind of the opposite of what we saw in Syriac. If there's no dot in Syriac, it's hard. Either way, these letters can be equated to some of the sounds we make. In fact, sometimes you'll see them transliterated with like an H after them. So BH, GH, DH, KH, PH, TH. That's to indicate the spirantization of the letter. And in fact, the spirantized sound often gets close to other sounds. So BH, B, P, P, becomes V. It's easy for the B that's underscored or the spirantized B to change to a V. So we pronounce it as a V effectively. The underlined B is a V. The G is R, GH. The D as DH is the, like the word the in English. The K underlined is KH or K. The P underlined is PH or F. This is like an F sound, basically, historically a spirantized P. So the P and F easily shift, between one another. And that's why we'll take Greek words in English and we'll write philosophy, right? PH, or, phobia. We don't write with an F. A lot of the Greek words that we import into English, we keep as PH for historical reasons. And then the T has a TH, and that's something that's productive in English too. Throw, throw. So the softened sounds are like the, ch, p, th. Each of these has 2 sounds, at least. There are some rules when we're learning the BeGedKePaT letters. The hard rule, the kushoyo, and the soft rule, the rukocho. So the hard rules can be summarized this way. The letters are doubled. If you see doubled lettering, and soft letters can't double. So if they're soft, they won't double. But if the letter doubles, it's automatically hard. B, G, D, K, P, T. So apart from being doubled when it follows a closed syllable. And I have an asterisk here usually because there's exceptions, right? Like if we're reading loan words from Greek into Syriac, for example, you could start a sound, you could start a word with a softened sound if that's what it is in Greek. But according to the way in which we teach Syriac, that's, if it follows a closed syllable, it's hard. So the sounds are soft when they follow an open syllable. When they follow a consonant-bearing schwa, so a schwa is kind of like it's like a half sound. If you're not familiar, you haven't studied these languages yet and read the grammars, basically it's like when you want to stop pronouncing a consonant and end a word in a consonant, but maybe there's a bunch together, there's a reason for it to have a little sound. So it's like a little oomph, it's not quite a full syllable, but it's a oof, something like that. And when it ends a closed syllable is the final rule for the soft sounds. So let's look at each of these. So hard rule number 1, we have doubled letters. And to bury, this is in the PL, to bury en masse. Le caber, and she said, is following a vav consecutive. Vat-tomer. In Syriac Aramaic, we have qabbel. I have the Biblical Aramaic alongside the Syriac when I can, and sagi. Hard rule number 2 is when it follows a closed syllable. We have mithbar. Mith closes the syllable, and bar is our next one. And then door, if it's at the beginning of a sentence, right, where there's nothing preceding it. In Syriac Aramaic, we have they shall be satisfied, nisbaron. And then we have mouth, pum, or pumo. In fact, if you're doing the West accent, you'd probably hear fumo because the P's have been leveled as F's by people who live in Arabic-speaking environments because there's no P in Arabic. So that sort of impacted the way these are pronounced. So soft rule number 1, after an open syllable, and we'll just activate the colors earlier, we have shatha because the comets in the first syllable here is open, and tha follows it. Avi. Now, in modern Hebrew, you just say shatha. They don't actually utilize this BeGedKePat sound as a soft sound anymore. The Syriac Aramaic example, we have tava, or tovo in this case. And then for the word kingdom, we have Syriac malkutho, or malkutha. And in Biblical Aramaic, we have something interesting. We have malechutha. So the second one actually has a historical sound following the lamed that ends up spirantizing the kaf, but that's more for rule number 2, the soft rules coming up. What we're looking at here is the hu as a open syllable, and tha is coming after the ku. So soft rule number 2, when it's after a consonant-bearing schwa. So for panos, this is an eye condition where veins sort of grow over collect over the lens or the retina of your eyeball. And we have this consonant-bearing schwa, tevalul. And then for the word you shall pour it, tishbachenu. Our Syriac Aramaic examples, for Biblical Aramaic, we have something like scroll, Megillah, and sfar for a document. And Syriac hifel, nfal, and inside, baro. For soft rule number 3, this is when it ends in a closed syllable. So we have nafshi, my soul, yashav, he sat. In Biblical Aramaic, we have hope, savra, or savro. And for hand, yav, or idho. Now let's just kind of go through and read the Hebrew real quick. I'm going to go ahead and I'll do a reading first, and then we'll talk about the different letters and how they're impacted by the BeGedKePat rules. ותראינה המילדות את האלוהים, ולא עשו כאשר דיבר עליהן מלך מצרים, ויתחיינה את הילדים. But the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. So looking here, just like we talked about earlier with the vav consecutive, that doubles the first letter of the verb. So the tav is doubled, and it's a hard sound. But there is, in the second word, hamyaledot, two different soft sounds. So the first one is following a consonant bearing schwa because there's two lameds there. It means with the dot in the lamed, it means there's two of them, right? So it's not yaldot, it's yaledot because there's two of them. It means the second one we vocalize. And so because we vocalize it, it means this dalet that follows is going to be soft or spirantized. And the tau on the end, or the tav on the end, is going to be spirantized because it's following the open syllable, thoth, ham yaledhoth. Historically, actually, the dalet and the tav in modern Hebrew are hard no matter what. Same with et, right? That's another version of the spirantized letter. Moving to the next line, we have ka'asher, which is starting a syllable here. Diber, so the dalet is starting the syllable here, and now we have a doubled bet, diber, to speak. And finally, the tav, again, is doubled because of the vav consecutive. We see et again, and hayaladim is our last word. We have a spirantized because it's following this open syllable from the comets under the lamed. So that's Hebrew. Now let's look at biblical Aramaic. Ud militha befum malka qal min shmaya nfal laq omrim Nebuchadnezzar malka malchutha adat minak. While the word was in the mouth of the king, there fell a voice from heaven, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from you. So similar to what we just saw in Hebrew. I mean, the rules are basically the same. Ud, where we have the final dalet spirantized following the halim vav. Milletha, there's two lameds there in the word for word, milletha. In Syriac today, when we just say it, we say meltho or meltha. We don't really double the lamed, in speech. But this is how it is historically. Milletha, so following the consonant bearing schwa, the tav is spirantized. Then our bet begins this other word in the mouth, bafum, so the pei is spirantized following the consonant bearing schwa under the bet. Malka, the king, we have the closed syllable mal, and so the kap is hard. Nfel follows the consonant bearing schwa. That was one of our examples we looked at. Lach follows an open syllable, so the kap is spirantized. Nebuchadnezzar. So the bet in Nebuchadnezzar follows the consonant bearing schwa on the nun. The kap follows the open syllable in the shurek, and the dalet closes the syllable, so it's also spirantized. So we get the trifecta there in Nebuchadnezzar for the three different spirantized examples. Malka, again, we saw above. Malachutha, again, that historical la following the lamed in biblical Aramaic ends up spirantizing the kap there. Adath, I should have highlighted the tau at the end of adat, but I didn't. That's also spirantized. They're both spirantized. And minach follows an open syllable. It is spirantized as well. Lastly, let's go ahead and look at Syriac. Kathsoden yashu lechensho slek turo uchadithev krev lwothe talmido. And when Jesus saw the multitudes, he ascended a hill, and when he was seated, his disciples drew near him. By now, you should kind of be getting the feel of this, right? Like here we have kaf at the beginning is hard. Following the fterho, it becomes soft, kav. Den starts at the beginning is hard. Lechensho follows rule number 2. Same with uchad, follows, the kaf follows rule number 2, but then the dalet follows the closing of the syllable. Ithev follows an open syllable and then closes the syllable at the end for the tau and the bet. Krev closes the syllable. Ilwothe follows an open syllable. Talmidal, the tau here is kushoyo. It's hard. It's starting the syllable here. Midau, we have a softened dalet, so it's thou at the end, following the open syllable mi. So that's basically it for your introduction to the BeGedKePat letters. If you have any questions about these, or if you're learning any of these languages on your own, and this video has been a help to you, go ahead and tell me so in the comments below, or reach out to me at my email address, professorwingert@gmail.com. Thank you again for watching. I hope this video has been a help to you and maybe encouraged you a little bit to go beyond just one of the languages, right? If you're doing Hebrew, maybe you want to do some biblical Aramaic or some Syriac and vice versa. People usually start with Hebrew or Syriac, usually Hebrew, but you can see how they all work together. Thanks again and see you soon.